Hi everyone, Janie here with Dig, Plant, Water, Repeat. Welcome back to my garden. Today is the next installment in my series that I'm doing with proven winners called Building the Foundation of a Successful Garden. It is a 5-part series where during our downtime of the gardening season, we are going through all the foundational issues so that we can remind ourselves, educate ourselves, and really give ourselves the tools to have a successful garden come spring. So when you go to the plant store and you buy those plants, bring them home, they're going to thrive, they're going to be beautiful, and you're going to be so proud of your garden. So we have already gone over the big three foundational topics, which is soil, light requirements, and water requirements. That is across the board for all gardeners, light, soil, and water. We all need that. Today's video, we're gonna get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more nuanced. And that is because today we're gonna talk about site issues, site-specific issues in your garden. So I want you to think of site issues as no garden is the same. Even neighbors, their gardens are not the same. Even one spot in your garden versus another spot in your garden is not the same. And that is because of site-specific issues. There could be soil compaction over here, or you could have someone has brought in a bunch of topsoil for construction over here. So in the same garden, you might have completely different site-specific issues and your garden is going to react differently. And you need to know that so that you can have a successful garden. So there are so many site-specific issues I could go over. I just chose 5 to talk about today and to troubleshoot with you all today. So let's get started. All right. First site-specific issue I wanted to talk to you all about today is humidity. Humidity or lack thereof in my case. So I live in Northern California, Zone 9B. And in Florida, specifically Tampa, Florida, they are Zone 9B as well. My garden couldn't be any more different than a Tampa, Florida garden. And that is because Tampa is not only hot, but it is extremely, extremely humid. I am hot here, but I am not humid at all. If anything, I'm too dry. So our gardens, whoever lives in Florida and my garden, we're going to act completely different, even though it's rated on the USDA zone map as zone 9. So different plants are going to react differently in our gardens. And that's something that's really important to understand and really important to remember. And there are specific plants that you can purchase that love humidity, and there are specific plants that you can purchase that hate humidity. So it's important to know what you have going on in your area. And it's important that you understand what plants you're choosing to put in your garden so that they're going to be happy with the humidity levels that you have. I have a garden in my front yard and I'm calling it my Best for the West garden. And the purpose of this garden is to guide everyone for hot, dry climates, plant selections. Check out my Best for the West video. I will link it down below if you do have a hot, dry climate like I do. Now, there are cool, dry climates and cool, humid climates. You just have to understand what's going on in your garden and choose your plants accordingly. The next site-specific issue that I want to talk about with all of you is kind of along the same vein as humidity, is sun strength. Right? And so we all know with light requirements, plants need a certain amount of sun, whether it be full sun or part shade, whatever it is. But we can get a little bit more nuanced with that depending on where your garden is in regards to the equator. We all know as we get closer to the equator, the sun gets stronger and it gets hotter. There are even maps that show sun strength in the United States, and we know that around Arizona area, the sun is at its absolute strongest. So if you have a plant that says, oh, it can take full sun, but you live in Arizona or you live where I live in Northern California, we have to understand that that sun that plant is getting is so much stronger than someone who lives in Wisconsin's full day sun. So the way to troubleshoot this and the way to understand this is if you have a very, very strong sun index, right? A sun that's very, very intense. Maybe a plant that could go in full sun might need to go in part sun. Vice versa for the garden that's in Wisconsin. Maybe a full shade plant needs a little bit of morning sun so that it can grow and it can thrive. So I want you all to think for site-specific issues, how strong is the sun in your area? And make sure that you choose your plants accordingly, and make sure that you put your plants in your garden in the specific light areas accordingly. The next site-specific issue I wanted to talk to you all about is one that I hate. It makes me very stressed out whenever it's a windy day here in California, because wind unfortunately does bring the risk of wildfires here. Wind is also really, really bad for my garden. And the reason why is because wind, especially hot, dry wind that we have in California, it blows across the foliage of the plants and it causes the plants' foliage, their leaves, to dry out so quickly that you almost don't have time to walk over and get the hose before that plant starts showing signs of wind stress. So it's something that I want you all to think about, and it's something that definitely can affect the success in your garden if you're not aware of the effects of wind. Now, not all is lost. There are plenty of things to do that you can troubleshoot if you live in a windy area and you get a lot of wind. One of them is you can start growing a windbreak. Yes, growing a windbreak. They actually sell hedges and trees that are specifically good for windbreaks that can protect your garden. The other thing you can do is you can actually specifically choose plants that are wind hardy and can tolerate the blowing around and the rustling. You can also protect them with other plants. Maybe if you have a really vulnerable plant that doesn't like to dry out at all, you can put it on the wayward side of your house. I think that's the right way to say it. Your house is basically protecting you it from the wind. Or you can put it in a specific spot or even behind another bigger plant that can handle more wind. So wind, unfortunately, is an issue in our gardens, and it's something that we have to remember that might be an issue in one part of our garden, but not another. So the next site-specific issue that we should talk about in our gardens is drainage. Drainage, again, goes along with soil. You have to know what type of soil you have to kind of know what type of drainage you have. Usually one goes with the other, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's other issues that can be at play. So drainage is usually when they say you have poor drainage when there is still standing water in the spot 12 hours later. So basically, if you dig a hole and you fill it with water and you come back 12 hours later, and if there's still standing water there, you have bad drainage and there's something that you should do about it. The reason why this is bad is because, again, the water stays there. And if you plant a plant in that hole, the plant's roots are going to become waterlogged and probably rot, and that plant isn't going to thrive. So something that you need to know about, especially if you have mulch or you cover the plant, you might not understand that drainage is bad in that area, and you might not know why your plants are doing so poorly, but it could be because of your drainage, which is site-specific issue. So what can you do about drainage? Best thing to do, amend your soil. Definitely amend your soil. Amending your soil with organic matter, such as compost or well-rotted manure, is really going to make the biggest difference. It's going to give the soil those air pockets so that the water can kind of drain through. And so your plant's roots are going to be staying away from that standing water that will be lower down. Something else that you can think about if you have poor drainage in certain areas of your garden is planting specific plants that are going to love that extra water and actually take it up for themselves and dry out your garden. There's a couple plants, for instance, Monarda is a fantastic plant that's going to suck up that extra moisture, and so it's going to help prevent standing water in that area. Willow trees kind of act the same way. So make sure you understand the drainage in your garden. If you're having issues with plants, if you notice that a plant is struggling and you don't know why, make sure you take a look at the drainage. See if you dig a hole and if you put some water in, see if it drains pretty well. If you still have water standing there the next morning, you might want to do something about it. The last site-specific issue I want to go over with all of you is water availability or drought conditions. And those of you who live in California and Arizona, and I'm sure other parts of the country, know exactly what I'm talking about. Here in California, we are finally out of drought for this year. Hopefully it stays that way. But for the last couple years, we've been in a severe drought, and a lot of gardeners here have faced watering restrictions in their gardens. And that is devastating. You spent all this time and money cultivating your garden, and now you can't water it, and you just have to watch it wither and die. It's very sad. I know it's a very, very sad thing. So there are things that you can do to help with this very common site-specific issue. One of the main ones is mulch. Mulch. I had an instructor tell me that mulch is so important in your garden. You can't just say it once. You have to say it 3 times. The reason why mulch is so important is it basically creates a protective layer over your soil. So whatever little water you do have to water that plant, the mulch is going to protect it from evaporating and going away too quickly. So lots and lots, a nice big thick layer of mulch to keep some moisture in your garden is super important when dealing with drought conditions. Then of course, there's always drought tolerant plants, and drought tolerant plants are a great option for people who live in hot, dry climates. So drought tolerant plants aren't necessarily plants that don't need to be watered. That is a common misconception, and I think it's important to understand that drought tolerant plants means that plant is going to be more patient with you until you get around to watering it again. A drought tolerant plant can handle periods of dryness a lot better than non-drought tolerant plants, and it's not going to show signs of stress as quickly. So if you do have watering restrictions and you're only able to water once a week or whatever, a drought tolerant plant is going to be able to handle that schedule so much better than a non-drought tolerant plant. Finally, I want you all to think about rain harvesting. Rain harvesting is huge, and I think it is a really, really good solution for a problem that's going to keep creeping up, especially for us here in California. So rain harvesting, I don't have them in this house yet, but I did have them in my last garden that I just moved out of last year, and they were rain barrels. I went with a company called Blue Barrel. They basically recycle food grade blue barrels, and they hook up to the gutter system on your house. And whenever it does rain, all the water drains into those rain barrels, and then you have precious water to water your plants later on in the season. The hard thing about rain harvesting is you have to pre-plan. You actually have to think about this when you do have some rain. So it's something to think about. It's something that I am definitely planning to install in this garden, and it's something that's going to help those of us who live in drought-stricken areas to manage water restrictions or to manage lack of water sometimes. So yes, we can live in an area that has drought. Drought is a major site-specific issue, but there are ways that we can get around it. So as you can see, this topic is much more complicated than just talking about soil or water or light requirements. It's much more nuanced, and there are so many site-specific issues. I had trouble choosing just 5 to talk about in this video. But I hope this opened your eyes to understand that all of our gardens are different. No one garden is the same, and not even one part of your garden is the same as another part of your garden. So start thinking about that if you have any issues with your plants. All right, so I have one more video in the Building the Foundations of a Successful Garden series with proven winners, and next month we are going to talk about plant selection. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and I will link my other videos in this series in the playlist in the description down below. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.